Okay, we'll get started now. Welcome to the Applicants webinar for the 2017 National Crime Victim Rights Week Community Awareness Project. I'm sure people will still be logging on, but let's get started now. My name is Steve Doreen. I'm the Executive Director of the National Association of VOCA Assistance Administrators. Our association members are the state agencies in every state and territory that administers the VOCA Victim Assistance formula grants. Also working on the project will be the project director, Lori Elwell, and our project consultant is Ann Seymour. I will be doing this webinar, but for those of you who are successful in getting funding under this initiative, you'll be working closely with Lori and Ann. Just a bit of technical information. Everybody's muted. We expect a couple of hundred people actually participating on the webinar, so in order to keep background noise eliminated, everybody's audio is being muted. However, we encourage you to use the chat or questions panel on the webinar to, if you have some questions or comments. Probably we will hold off the questions until the very end, but please feel free to submit your questions in the question box throughout the presentation as they occur to you. This webinar will be recorded and it will be posted on our website along with copies of the slides as well as a PDF of the slides, which you can download now off of the panel, the control panel under handouts. We've posted the PDF of the slides, so you may want to take that down if you want to record notes as we go through this. And as I said again, this is being recorded now, and we will post it on our website probably no later than by tomorrow. Just a ground rule on the presentation and the discussion. This is a competitive process. We typically receive 2 to 3 times the number of applications that we're able to support. So it's a competitive process. We try to provide all of the relevant information to everybody on equal grounds. So they are all on the website or presented in this webinar. And we particularly encourage, and in fact require, you to look at the applicant guide. Everything we're covering here is discussed in greater detail in the applicant guide, and strongly encourage you to look through that and use that as your reference in completing the application. So please don't ask us. We're not able to respond to individual questions related to your individual proposals or applications, how to make your particular proposal stronger. We have to be fair to everybody. So we will, try on this webinar to respond to generic questions, but not questions related to specific proposals or applications. This is our agenda. Hope to cover a lot of ground in terms of the project overall and in terms of the specific application requirements. And we'll start out with just some general overview background information. As I said, our association, the National Association of VOCA Assistance Administrators, we're managing this project under a cooperative agreement with the Office for Victims of Crime in the U.S. Department of Justice. So we're sort of their management arm in terms of this project. We do have a website. It's cap.navaa.org. There's no www, but everything that we're covering here plus a lot more is available on that website. The maximum amount that we can support individual projects is $5,000. We cannot exceed the $5,000 limit. And we expect to fund at least 60 projects. I can tell you, in fact, we're going to be funding more than 60 projects. In the past, we've funded upwards of 80 projects in a year. It depends on the total costs of the amount of requests and funds that we have available. But at a minimum, there'll be 60 projects. The overall purpose of the National Crime Victim Rights Week Community Awareness Project is to increase the general public's awareness of the rights and services for victims of all types of crime during National Crime Victim Rights Week. And I want to stress that we're looking at supporting information awareness activities to the general public. We're not looking to target specific populations or specific or restricted audiences. The more your proposal addresses the general public, the stronger it will be considered. Again, we're looking at providing information for victims of all types of crime. Again, if you're targeting just specific or addressing specific types of crime, those proposals will probably be considered weaker than those that address a broader range of crime victimizations. And again, the focus is on National Crime Victim Rights Week, which in 2017 will be the week of April 2nd to the 8th. That's earlier than usual, and that may present some issues for you in your planning and implementation of projects. We're aware of that, and we hope to expedite our process as much as we can. But the point here is that we want to focus on National Crime Victim Rights Week. There are other events that are going on during the same time, but we're focusing specifically on Crime Victim Rights Week, and that's something you need to bear in mind. I'll discuss that a bit more as we go through this. These are examples of the typical types of activities that we've been supporting in the past. Public events, in contrast to private or closed or restricted events, mass media advertising, billboards, newspaper ads, TV, radio, public service announcements, and the like. Printed materials, brochures, projects have put together resource directories, calendars, other information that might be useful, as well as promotional giveaway items that reinforces the message of National Crime Victim Rights Week. We do not fund training in the sense of professional development or self-defense classes. Again, the focus is on public awareness, not on skills development. We, as I said, are looking to target the general public rather than private or limited access events or ongoing activities or non-Crime Victim Rights Week activities such as Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Those can be brought up, but the focus, the target, the intent is to concentrate on National Crime Victim Rights Week recognition. These are the types of agencies that are eligible to receive funding: public agencies, governmental agencies, nonprofit organizations, community-based service organizations, faith-based or tribal organizations, or community coalitions. We cannot accept applications from individual persons or for-profit entities. If you're a nonprofit, most likely you have a 501c3 tax exemption, but that's not required. If there are other ways of establishing your nonprofit status, that would be acceptable as well. This is important. This is a federal requirement. You must have a unique entity identifier. Those used to be called DUNS numbers. The federal government has changed the way they refer to these. It's a requirement in order to get funding. They're 9 digits. In the past, we've had people submit their taxpayer identification number or employer identification number. This is a separate number. It's 9 digits. It does not, usually the TIN or the EINs have 2 digits, then a hyphen. This does not have that. So be sure you know what you're submitting, because we have, that's mandated that we have to have that. If you don't have it, you can go to this website there. They're free. You can get them right away, but you'll be required to submit that to us before we can agree to provide you with funding. The only exception to that rule are community coalitions. but other types of entities or organizations must have a unique entity identifier. As far as programs that have previously received funding, you are eligible to reapply. In the process of making decisions and funding recommendations, we are interested in funding new proposals or new projects. So previous recipients are eligible, but preference could, depending on the relative strength of the proposals, might be considered a lower priority to fund, but you are eligible. The National Crime Victim Rights Resource Center. This is something many agencies and programs rely on for materials. The website here is where you can sign on to their mailing list. This year, the resource guide, there will not be a hard copy of the resource guide. It'll all be digital that you can download. You can request a printed copy of the theme poster. And if you subscribe to their mailing list, you'll get a notice about the availability of the materials as well as the ability to request a printed theme poster. We expect the resource guide materials to be available in early 2017. And let me emphasize, we do not produce or distribute the resource guide. We work with you, let you know when they're available. When we find things out, we try to help with some of the materials, but that's not something we have control over. So people often ask us for copies of the material or for information on when it's allowed, when it's available. We don't have any control about that. We probably find out about that the same time you do. But we do know this year, or 2017, the Victim Rights Week colors, theme, and poster. I don't think they're officially out yet, but we do know what they will be like. The poster will look something like the one you see on the screen here, and the colors are also posted. They'll be royal blue, red, cream. The numbers, we have this posted also on the frequently asked questions page of our website, so you can prepare your materials as you do your applications. We're going to ask you about how you're going to incorporate these. So this year, unlike previous years, this year you know what these are going to be like, so you can prepare your applications more specifically. The theme for 2017 is Strength, Resilience, Justice. The colors again are royal blue, red, and cream. And you can take a look at what the poster is going to look like. I don't believe there's going to be a separate logo as has been provided in previous years. I think it'll just be the poster and the colors as well as the theme. So here's a quick look at the timeline. The important date here is that applications are due by midnight Eastern Time on Wednesday, October 26th. As I said earlier, there's a bit less time to prepare applications than in the past because we are trying to expedite this because of the relative short period between the time we can announce funding and Victim Rights Week in 2017. So you have to have your applications, we have to receive them by that time on October 26th. We hope to be able to announce funding decisions by late December. We will notify every applicant whether or not their proposals are being funded, so you don't have to be left in the dark. And we will also post a notice on the website when those notices go out. So if you don't hear from us, if you check our website and you see that the notices have been sent out but you haven't received a notice, then you can contact us. But that's the timeline that we anticipate. And then for those who are being funded, we have a timeline for further events. We'll be doing some webinars for those who are funded, and there are other deadlines that we'll be following up with you if you're selected. Okay. Now for the applications themselves. The applications can be downloaded from our website. There's a link on applications. We provide the applications in either PDF or Word. There's a fillable version of each that you can do on your computer, or you can download the form and write it in or type it in if people still have typewriters, or fill it out on your computer. We also have posted there the applicant's guide, and once again, that's something that we consider required reading. Okay. We do require that you only use the forms, the application forms that we're providing. You have to complete all sections, as you'll see later on. Each section is graded separately, so if you fail to complete a section, your scores are going to be reduced. You're not allowed to submit anything, any additional pages or attachments. Don't have letters of support sent to us. We're only going to be looking at those 4 pages of the application we provide. If you send in something like that, they'll be completely ignored. Again, the application deadline is October 26th, and we do try to acknowledge our receipt of your application within a few days. We suggest you try to submit the application earlier. Frankly, we usually get deluged with applications at the last minute, and so it's hard for us to keep up acknowledging all of them right away. And if for some reason there's a problem and you haven't received an email acknowledgement, for some reason we haven't received it, after the deadline, we're not going to be able to accept it. So I'd suggest you submit it within at least several days prior to the deadline so you can get an acknowledgement. And if you don't get that acknowledgement, then you can follow up to see if there's been some technical problem in our receipt of your application. Again, follow the applicant guidelines. Some tips based on previous years of doing this. Each section, each narrative section, there's a limit on the number of words allowed. Don't exceed that. The number of words, frankly, we're trying to be very economical in the number of words. So we encourage you to be very concise. It is possible with these forms if you want to write something up on in a separate document and then copy and paste them. But please don't use bullets or formatting, because when you do that, it's sometimes hard to print out or copy in the way that you intend it to be read. So I suggest you do this in a narrative form, paragraph forms, without any fancy formatting or bulleting. Be very straight, concise. Avoid unnecessary superlatives. Again, keep within the word limit. You don't have to tell us how wonderful you are, because we know everybody's wonderful, but just be very focused on the proposal. And by that I mean, look at what you're asking us to fund. Look specifically at the budget. Provide only the information requested. Don't go outside of what we need to know. These are very, they're small applications. People are going to read these and just look for specific pertinent information. Be mindful of what is and is not allowable as we go through that. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. Because people reading this, they're aware of what's allowable, what's not allowable. So for example, this happens quite frequently. We are not allowed to fund food or beverages. Those are U.S. Department of Justice rules. A lot of times people will put together proposed events at which food may be served. You can accept donated food. There are requirements about doing that. But if we're not using our funds to pay for the food, then try to avoid raising the issue. Instead of having an event at noon at which food is served, don't call it lunch. Call it an event or a ceremony. Just be mindful so that it avoids raising a question. If you called it a lunch, we'll look to see then, is there food involved or beverages involved in the use of these funds? That's not allowed. So just try to be mindful of those kinds of issues. And then finally, check your math. We're going to be checking your math. A lot of times we've seen just some carelessness in terms of the arithmetic, and that also will not make your application look as professional or as strong as it should be. I'm now going to go through the application itself section by section. This is the section 1, which is basically your organizational information. The applicant agency, that is the one agency that will be, if you're awarded a subgrant, that's the agency, the legal entity that we will be entering into a contract with. So when you enter that name, make sure it's the legal name, because that's what will appear on the contract. Don't use acronyms or generic terms. So for example, don't just say Victim Witness Program. You know, you can describe it as Adams County Victim Witness Program if that's the correct legal entity. Avoid doing business as, we hope to keep them as short as possible, but again, that's the name of the entity that we will hold responsible if you're funded for carrying out the project, and will be our contact. Other organizations can collaborate. We encourage that and we ask about that, but we need one entity that will be the legal recipient of funds. And then also you'll see here is the area for the unique entity identifier. That's required, so don't leave that blank. The name of the contact, we require every subgrantee to identify one person to be the contact. That's the person we will most likely be communicating with. That doesn't mean that other people can't be involved on the project. For those who get funding, we offer some technical assistance. We have a listserv. Other people can be involved in the actual planning and implementation, but for official communications, we need one person who's the contact. We need that person's telephone number, email address. The email address is required. It's really our main means of communication. Virtually everything we do is either through listserv, through emails, etc. You'll see a box there that says amount requested. That's the total amount. We'll go through the budget in a second, but that amount has to equal the same, that has to be the same number that you enter in as the total project cost. In the past, we've seen different numbers, and it just raises some confusion, and we really require that to be the same. It is possible that an application, a proposal might be scored weaker if some of this information is not followed. Website, if your agency has one, we'd like to know what that is as well. In this section of the first page, you need to indicate the type of organization you are. That should be pretty straightforward. I'm not sure what an other one is, because most of the ones that we get fall within the other 5 categories, but if you don't fall within those 5 other categories, we ask you to describe what other type of organization it is, but it really should fall within one of those 5. The next 2 questions are also required by the federal government in making these awards. The first one asks if your agency is suspended or debarred. You should know that there is a database available that we will check, and we're required to check to make sure your agency is eligible to receive federal funding. The next one I want to call your attention to, it's one that we had to start asking last year. And read this very carefully. It talks about your agency's confidentiality agreements. It's not referring to client confidentiality agreements. It really refers to policies that would restrict whistleblowers from reporting waste, fraud, and abuse. If you answer yes to either of those 2 questions, you're not eligible to get funding. So be careful in in how you respond to those. Read them very carefully. And then finally, we ask if you or a major partner has received a previous funding under this program. If you have, we ask you to indicate which years you received funding. On our main website, there's a link to previous recipients. You can search through those. They're listed by state, but we do ask you to complete that. And be careful because in the past we've had people answer no and then check some boxes, or answer yes and not check boxes. So it can't be one of those situations. And then finally, on that first page, we ask you to briefly describe your agency's experience in providing and advocating for crime victim rights and services. Indicate, for example, what year your agency started providing services, who you provide them to, if there are any geographical restrictions, things of that nature, just so that we have a sense as to your agency's background in working and being able to inform the community about crime victim rights and services. The next page is Section 2, Project Description. This is the most important one, where you're going to tell us very specifically and concisely what you propose to do, how you propose to enhance the general public's awareness of victims' rights during Victims' Rights Week. Let me say, here it says in conjunction with Victim Rights Week. We realize that some activities may last for a couple of weeks or even a month. As I said earlier, we're not funding ongoing or permanent types of activities, but we realize sometimes events may overlap. It may be, for example, a billboard you might rent for a month during April, say. So we want to know the exact dates that you're proposing to carry out the events, the targeted audiences, the geographical areas, and be careful here. We're going to look at your description, your narrative description, in conjunction with your budget. So anything you describe you want to do, and again, we're just focused on your use of these funds. Anything you describe here, we should be able to tell by looking at the budget how you're going to fund them. So there should be a direct and logical connection between what you say you're going to do and how you're going to fund it through these funds. This is your budget. Again, conversely, anything you list here, we should be able to look at your description and see, okay, here's how this item is going to be used. Be as detailed as you can. We realize at this stage of the game, you may not have everything determined, but be as detailed and specific as you can. Don't, for example, simply list, say, a candlelight vigil with a dollar amount. Break it down. How much are you going to, how many candles are you going to buy at what cost? Ribbons, printed programs. Be as detailed as you can. And again, don't just list some kind of a generic activity and try to estimate the total cost without breaking down the individual line items. This is an example here where we want you to specify, for example, you're having buttons printed up and there's an additional cost for setup and shipping, say. So this is an example. You're buying 1,000 buttons at 10 cents a piece. That's $100 and an additional per job cost of $20. So you'd list those separately. You can, if you wish, in this example alternative, include that setup cost within the unit cost. So here it's showing 1,000 buttons at 12 cents a piece. The total amount is the same, but we'll be able to calculate the amounts to make sure that they're accurate and reasonable. There's a space at the bottom of that page for you to write any explanation or show us calculations that won't fit up on that single line. And now we get to indirect costs. Indirect costs were allowed beginning last year. That's a government-wide provision. All agencies can, if they choose, ask to recover indirect costs. It gets kind of complicated, but it's your choice. If your agency has an approved federally negotiated indirect cost rate, you can use that rate. If your agency has never had a federally negotiated indirect cost rate, then you have a choice of asking for a de minimis rate of up to 10%. Now, if your agency had a federal negotiated rate, but that expired, then you're out of luck. Or you can choose not to request indirect costs. I'll go through this in a little bit of detail because it gets complicated, but we have to try to abide by the federal process. Asking for indirect costs, while they're allowable, will not allow you to exceed the $5,000 maximum award. If you choose indirect costs, and here's an example of the budget page itself, you enter in the indirect cost rate. That's a percentage. As I said, it's either a percentage that was approved by the federal government in an agreement, and if you want to enter that rate, you may. If you enter any number in this space, you'll see down here there's a footnote that including an indirect cost rate means you're certifying to us that you either have a federally approved rate or you're choosing a de minimis rate. When you do that, you then have to let us know whether it's the federally approved rate by marking that box or the de minimis rate. Now here's an example of how this works. Let's say all of your direct costs, all of the individual line items that you listed above totals $4,500, and you're asking for the 10% rate as a de minimis rate. It's 10% of the total direct costs, so it's 10% of the $4,500. That's $450. Last year, when we were doing this, some people thought it would be 10% of the maximum grant amount, and they would indicate $500 instead of $450. Or they simply decided that they would sort of top off the amount to reach the $5,000. It doesn't work that way. It's the rate times the total direct costs. Now, that rate is going to be applied regardless of the actual direct costs that you incur. So when it comes time to be reimbursed, if you underspend, you can't increase your indirect cost rate. We will apply that same rate to whatever the actual final direct costs are. So if you ended up spending, in this example, $4,000, your indirect cost amount will be $400. We'll apply that 10% to the $4,000. I hope that's clear, but it gets kind of complicated. Next section of the application is additional project information. This is where we ask you to tell us how you plan to incorporate the National Crime Victim Rights Week theme, logo, and colors. This also is very important. We will look at this. Those who are funded will be required to submit to us documentation that you actually carried out the project that you told us you would do. Usually it's by photographs or other documentation. We're going to look to see if you've actually used the theme and the colors and the logo as you proposed, that this project actually was carried out as a Crime Victim Rights Week project. In the past, unfortunately, some projects have used other colors, other themes, their own theme. They may have focused strictly on, say, Sexual Assault Awareness Month without any mention or reference to National Crime Victim Rights Week. We were not able to reimburse those projects if they did not actually carry out what they said they were going to do. So this is very important, and I hope you give some thought to what you submit here. Next section asks you to identify any co-sponsors or collaborative organizers or organizations that are going to contribute to this specific project. We're not asking for general letters of support of your agency or community activities, but of this specific proposal. And then finally, we ask you to tell us how you plan to involve victims or survivors of crime in the planning and implementation of this project. So that's the application. You need somebody with the legal authority to sign it, date it, There is a provision there for an electronic signature, but those are the 4 pages of the application. The buttons on the bottom here are on the PDF, the fill-in PDF, which allows you to print it out. We encourage you to keep a copy of your proposal, and then you can see that blue box that says email. If you press that, it'll launch your computer's email client or application, whether it's Outlook or something else, and it will attach the application to your email and enable you to email that as an attachment to us. So again, you can email the application to us at cap@navaa.org. You can mail it at this address, 5702 Old Sauk Road, Madison. Be sure you mail it in time for us to receive it by the deadline, or if you FedEx it or have it hand delivered. Again, this is the time we have to have it received. Quickly, I'm going to go over some of the allowable uses. Again, I'm not going to go through all of these. You can print out the PDF or review this later on. Mass media advertising, printed material. The promotional giveaway items, they must contain a message related to Crime Victim Rights Week, even if it just says National Crime Victim Rights Week with the dates or the slogan, or uses the colors. But again, it has to have some relationship to Crime Victim Rights Week. This is a federal limitation. Each item cannot exceed $20 per unit, which includes the cost of setup and shipping. Recognition awards, the certificates, plaques, cannot exceed $50 each. Again, that includes setup and shipping. You can pay for event speakers. If you know who you're going to invite, you should identify that person in the application. The federal requirements limit the payment of paid speakers to $650 a day total. And by total, we mean you can't supplement that with other funding sources. It can only be $650 a day. It could be less than a full day, $81.25 an hour. A day consists of only 8 hours. You can't pay for more than 8 hours in a day. But you can also pay a speaker for reasonable and justifiable time for preparation or travel. You also have to follow your agency's travel guidelines. If not, they can't exceed the federal travel regulations. Those are spelled out in more detail in the applicant guide and other information you'll get. But those are costs that you can estimate for your application. Equipment, we don't allow these funds to be used to buy equipment unless you can demonstrate that you can't borrow or get donated equipment, and to show us that it's more economical for you to buy an item than to rent or lease it. For space, the federal government requires that the combined cost of space and audio video equipment cannot exceed $25 per person per day. So if you're expecting 100 people to attend your event on one day, you can't spend more than $250, or 100 people would be $2,500 for the space rental and AV rental. You do need to have some documentation that you've solicited some bids. You don't have to use a formal bidding process. If you call around and make notes or look in newspapers or what have you, do it by email, but be sure you're able to document that you checked out at least 3 facilities before you can use these funds to pay for space rental. And we've gone over indirect costs. Unallowable costs, agency time, staff time. We can't pay for that for your actual staff time working on the project or overhead other than as an indirect cost. We are prohibited from paying for any food, beverages, or refreshments. As I said earlier, you can't accept donated food and beverages. You should indicate that, say, in the co-sponsor if you know somebody's going to donate some food, but we can't pay for any of that. Entertainment is not fundable, and that includes things that you use to try to attract people to attend an event. Children's bounce houses or bands or DJs or things like that are not allowable. It is permissible if you're having a certain event like a candlelight vigil to have, let's say, a local school choir or church choir. If it fits in with the nature of the event and it's a small, reasonable amount as an honoraria, that's fine. But entertainment simply for the purpose of making it enjoyable and to attract people to attend is not allowable. No fundraising activities, either directly or indirectly. Read the applicant guide. We have several examples of things that have come up in the past that we were not able to fund. So, for example, if you're having a website developed, you can't have a donate button, or you have an event and a silent auction, even if you're raising money for a different organization, that is completely unallowable, and it may result in us not being able to fund anything in connection with that event. We can't pay for bar or alcohol. No monetary gifts, including cash prizes or gift cards. And as I said earlier, no trainings, no professional development, no continuing education credits, self-defense and the like, and no lobbying. And lobbying includes not just legislation, but any kind of public policy at any level of government, local, state, or federal. Just a word about program income. Program income basically is if you plan to charge a fee. This has come up in the past for, say, a registration fee for a 5K walk or run. Anything that generates income is considered program income as a result of the activity we're funding. It has to be approved in advance. It requires separate accounting, and the money that's generated has to be used either for another allowable project activity, or it's used to reduce the amount of federal money that you're going to get reimbursed. It becomes very difficult. Maybe it may not always be worth your doing. So it's the kind of thing, if you're planning on doing that, you need to let us know, and we will need to approve it in advance. Okay, quickly, our organization, we have a panel of people who will be reviewing and scoring everybody's application. As a team, they'll get together, make recommendations to OVC, and OVC makes the final decision. You can see here the relative points that each section is given, and you may use that as a guide in terms of how much, how hard you work on answering those questions. In addition to the scores themselves, we'll put together a packet of recommendations. And so in addition to simply a numerical score, this committee will be looking at the extent to which projects address rights and services to victims of all types of crime. As I said before, if you're looking at focusing on just one type of crime, it may be given a lesser consideration than those that serve a broader population. We hope to fund at least one project in each state, and we will more likely, all of the things being equal, we would probably fund a new or not recently funded project as opposed to one that just received funding. And again, we hope to have the decisions be able to notify you by late December of the funding decision. And then for those who get funding, we try to provide more than just financial support. We provide technical assistance. Project Director Lori Elwell is the person who will be handling all administrative, financial, programmatic decisions, and Ann Seymour is our consultant who will be providing advice and consultation on planning and implementation. One of the things that Ann does is she prepares a series of bulletins we call CAP tips. These have ranged from a half a dozen to 18 or so during the course of a year. The ones that are written currently, we distribute to those agencies that are getting current grants, sort of a perk for having been selected. But everybody has access to all of the ones that were done in previous years, and those are available on our website. And you can see here some examples of the kinds of planning and implementation advice that we provide. Last year, and I think again this year, there'll be a special issue on activities for children during Crime Victim Rights Week with some activity books and things like that that will be provided. So that's an extra advantage of being selected for one of these funds. And so that's it as far as the presentation goes. We have time for some questions, and there are a number of questions. I will just sort of go through these as they were entered in here. And the first one is, will this PowerPoint be accessible after the webinar? Yes, it's going to be, it's being recorded and will be posted. There are a couple of comments here about having problems hearing. I'm sorry about that. If there was problems with the sound, if you missed anything, again, I suggest you check out the recording, which should be posted no later than tomorrow. There's a question about getting a list of webinar attendees. I don't know about being able to provide a list of attendees, but typically what we do is for those who are selected, we do share a directory of projects, so if people want to collaborate, that's possible. There's a question here. In other words, how would two or more collaboratives apply, that is, two orgs coming together to create an event? Well, frankly, we're very unlikely to provide funding to two projects in the same community. And our encouragement is to collaborate with other agencies or organizations within your community. These are typically community-wide events. Sometimes they're multi-county. So you'd know better than us other organizations within your community who might be interested in working with you, as opposed to somebody in a different state or area who's also being funded. Are applications to be submitted via mail? Applications can be submitted either via mail or via email. Frankly, most of the ones we get are sent via email. As I mentioned earlier, if you're going to mail it in, be certain to do that early enough so that we receive it by the deadline, either through U.S. Post Office, Postal Service, or through FedEx or UPS or what have you. Just be sure it gets to us by midnight on October 26th. The next question I have, when would the reimbursement funds be received? Reimbursement will be received very quickly after you submit an after-action report. Every project is required to submit an after-action report reimbursement request, which is then reviewed. As I mentioned throughout the presentation, we will be checking for certain things. We collect data on what you've done. We require you to submit documentation of what you've done so we can ensure compliance. If we're funding, say 60 to 80 projects, all of which are going to occur within the same week or several weeks, it's physically impossible for us to actually do a site visit. So we need some assurance ahead in advance of our reimbursing you. Once you submit the reimbursement request and it's approved, we usually have a check turned around within just a few days. I see here some more problem with the audio. I hope that's been fixed. If not, you're not hearing this. But if you can hear me now and you've missed something, please check the recording in the next day or so. Okay, going on. I heard you say if we underspend, because costs vary between the time of application to the time of implementation, it is generally okay to underspend. Or can we change the scope if a plan originally proposed in the application is not possibly at the time of the award implementation? We do provide for budget modifications, program modifications, and so we recognize that at the application stage, these are budgets, they're proposals that sometimes you might be able to do something more economical or have to change something. We do recognize that, and Laurie will be working with you if you need to submit a budget modification or change the scope or nature of your plan. Generally what happens is people estimate costs that may be a bit higher than the actual costs. And so it's not unusual for the actual reimbursement to be somewhat less than the amount in the original budget proposal. Next question, are there any requirements for prior approval for marketing and outreach materials to ensure the logo and appropriate colors are used? We do not require prior approval except for the use of the Department of Justice or the Office for Victims of Crime logos on materials that they did not provide. If you were to, most projects use the materials that are provided by the Office for Victims of Crime. You can download those. We try to help you if there's an issue with the graphics or try to customize it. But generally people will use the web banners, the logos. They post bookmarks and various types of buttons and other types of graphic materials that are used in these materials. Those don't require prior approval. Again, as long as you stick to the approved colors and logo and theme, you'll be okay. It doesn't require prior approval, except if you want to use their logo, the Department of Justice's logo, on materials that you create. That's the only time prior approval is required. Again, if you don't use the colors and the theme and what have you, then you run the risk of not being reimbursed. So if you adhere to the colors and the theme, your materials indicate National Crime Victim Rights Week with the dates, which is what's typically done, then you're okay. Next question. On the program funding side, you list examples. I wanted to confirm that you do not want to us to use this event to fundraise. Not only do I not want you to, you're not allowed to. That's a federal requirement. So any form of fundraising, directly or indirectly, will result in your not being able to get reimbursed for those activities. Can several agencies combine funding to pay for a speaker? Yes, to the extent that this project is going to be paying for the speaker, then the total cost, the daily cost for that speaker cannot exceed $650 a day or $81.25 an hour. So even if there are other agencies, the sum total for that speaker cannot exceed the $650 per day. If there are several agencies and one of whom is getting a sub-grant from us and one isn't, you can prorate those costs, but it would also be allowable for the one agency getting the grant to pay the entire cost, again, as long as it does not exceed $650 a day. The $650 a day does not include a reasonable out-of-pocket costs for their travel expenses subject to the federal travel regulations. Is there a social media hashtag for National Crime Victim Rights Week? Actually, there was last year. Ann Seymour developed that, and we'll probably be doing that again. And I think we had some Twitter campaigns as well. But we don't have that set up as yet. But we will be letting that known. Are there examples of past projects that have been selected to receive the grant that can be referred to? Yes, there's a lot of them. As I said, if you go to our website, cap.navaa.org, there's a link to previous recipients, and you can go through those. It lists the recipients and a brief summary of what their activities were. So that will give you an idea of the kinds of things we have supported in the past. Next question, can you reimburse multiple people under the same project? If my office splits part of the upfront costs with another office, can reimbursement be split between two or more ways? We're going to reimburse the agency that's the applicant. In some cases, if you're a public agency and you want us to send the reimbursement, say, to your county treasurer, we can do that, but we can only reimburse the one agency that we have the contract with. It would be up to you if you wanted to share that with other entities or other organizations, but again, these are costs that this is a contract that we are having with one agency, and that's the agency we will reimburse. If we are holding a memorial mass and any type of training that are not to be grant funded during our week, do we exclude those activities on the mass media advertising that we are proposing to be grant funded? I'm not sure I understand the question. If we are holding a memorial mass and any type of training that are not to be grant funded during our week of activities, do we exclude those activities? I think if we're paying for the advertising for National Crime Victim Rights Week and the ad mentions the training, but we are not paying for the training, I think that would be allowable. We're not paying for the training itself, and as long as the advertising is focused on National Crime Victim Rights Week, then I think we would probably approve paying for the advertisement, but not the training itself. I see some more audio problems. Examples of indirect costs. Indirect costs are almost everything that would be allowable, but that you cannot attribute to this specific project. And it gets to be a very complicated area. The examples of indirect costs are really relevant to those agencies that have a federally negotiated rate. Because of the change in the federal rules, you can now request a de minimis cost, which does not require you to enumerate indirect costs. But as an example, let's say you have an executive director or an accountant that's providing services to your agency, some of which might be involved in, say, doing your budget on this project, but we're not paying for that accountant. That might be considered an indirect cost. Or your space, your electricity, your telephone costs are all things that are costs of doing business but are not directly fundable under this project. So if you have a federally negotiated rate, those indirect costs were already identified in that negotiation. It does not include things that are not allowable, such as lobbying, which is not a permissible cost. So that's already been taken out of the calculation when your agency has a negotiated rate. If it doesn't have a negotiated rate, it never had a negotiated rate, it then has the option of having this de minimis rate of up to 10%, in which case you're not identifying specific indirect costs. I hope that's as confusing to you as it is to me, because it's a very complicated subject and people are still struggling to fully understand it. Next question, when you ask that a major project partner has applied previous years, does this mean an agency that is part of the same event that is held annually during Crime Victim Rights Week has received this award? Would we check yes for this? Yes, if you know that one of your partners, let's say you're a domestic violence program and you have a community-wide event and you're partnering with the DA's office, and you know the DA's office got Crime Victim Rights Week award for this event, then yeah, we'd check yes for that. Please clarify, grant funds are not provided at the time of the award, only after the planned events via reimbursement. That's correct. The reimbursement is made after you submit an after-action report fund request. We don't provide the grant funds up front. Very honestly, there's a lot of these projects going on. If we provided grant funds up front and there was underspending or unallowable costs, it would be very difficult for us to get that money refunded. So we don't advance the funds up front. Okay, next question. Do all the materials have to have NCVRW on them, or if we use the colors and have other materials with the name and date on them, would that be okay? Yes, explain to us what you plan to do. You don't have to use the DOJ provided materials. Most projects do because it's easier and it creates a cohesive national campaign. But as long as you use the colors or other things that you develop and have the name and the date and the theme or what have you, that would be okay. Can we target a particular population, a particular group of victims, as long as we use the logo and dates? That's two different questions really, but yes, you can target a particular population, but as I said, we're more likely to give greater weight to applications that are serving or targeting broader populations, but there's no prohibition against it. It's just a matter of sort of a relative judgment as to wanting to broaden the message to the most number of people about the most number of types of crimes. Then the second part of that question is, as long as we use the logo and dates. Logo and dates, actually I don't think there's a logo this year, but it's the concept of recognizing Crime Victim Rights Week. So if you incorporate the dates, you use the colors, you refer to National Crime Victim Rights Week, we'll look at all of that to make sure that it's consistent with the message of National Crime Victim Rights Week. To clarify, we do not put OVC or I guess it says NM, New Mexico Justice Anywhere on product. For example, our banner or backpack with logo, just colors and logo, correct? No, that's not correct. You can use, you're not required to put the OVC logo. You can only use the OVC logo on the materials they provide. You're not required to use their materials. Okay, you can use your logo as well as the Crime Victim Rights Week information on it. So it's any one or all of those, as long as the overall intent of the project is to promote National Crime Victim Rights Week. You can certainly include local information. Many projects do include local contact information. How do people get access to your services? For example, a lot of projects will put together a resource directory or a bookmark with the list of agencies in the community and telephone numbers. So it's not limited to just that stuff. When and where will this webinar be posted? Probably it'll be posted by tomorrow, and where, if you just go to the home page of the Community Awareness Project website, which is cap.navaa.org, you'll see it. It'll be posted. A link will be posted right on the top of the home page, probably by sometime tomorrow. And I believe that's the last question. And so with that, I appreciate your time and attention, and look forward to getting your applications. So thank you very much, and have a good rest of your day.